The United States trade deficit widened sharply in December, closing out a year in which America's goods trade gap with India reached $58.2 billion. The latest data from the US Census Bureau and the Bureau of Economic Analysis show a significant month on month increase in the overall deficit. The goods and services deficit rose to $70.3 billion in December, up from a revised $53.0 billion in November. Exports fell 1.7% to $287.3 billion, while imports climbed 3.6% to $357.6 billion, driving a wider gap. The increase was largely due to goods trade. The goods deficit expanded by $15.7 billion to $99.3 billion in December, while the services surplus narrowed by $1.6 billion to $29 billion. In December alone, the US goods deficit with India stood at $5.2 billion. For the full year of 2025, the goods trade gap with India totaled $58.2 billion, placing India among Washington's larger bilateral deficits. For the entire year of 2025, the overall US goods and services deficit came in at $901.5 billion, slightly lower than the $903.5 billion recorded in 2024. Exports rose to $199.8 billion to $3,432.3 billion, while imports increased to $197.8 billion to $4,333.8 billion. The goods deficit widened by $25.5 billion to $1,040.9 billion in 2025, even as the services surplus increased by $27.6 billion to $339.5 billion, partially offsetting the broader trade imbalance. In comparison with other trading partners, the US goods deficit stood at $218.8 billion, with the European Union $202.1 billion, with China $196.9 billion, with Mexico and $178.2 billion, with Vietnam and $146.8 billion, with Taiwan. On the export side in December, goods exports fell. Industrial supplies and materials also dropped in non-monetary gold. However, capital goods exports rose, with semiconductors export up and pharmaceutical preparations increasing by a $1.3 billion. Goods exports also rose in December. Capital good imports increased by $5.6 billion, with computer accessories up $3.4 billion and telecommunication equipment up to $1.3 billion. Industrial supplies imports rose, including higher copper and crude oil shipments. In real terms, the goods deficit increased by 12.5 billion or 14.8% to 97.1 billion in December. The data are closely watched in both Washington and New Delhi as trade balances shape ongoing debates over tariffs, manufacturing strategy, and supply chain diversification between the world's two largest democracies.